Hello to my friends in Bratislava. So we had, I thought, a very interesting conference, and I got a few questions after that. So let me try and answer a few of them. Question 1: is it possible to open our eyes and see why we really made some decisions without telling stories? So it's very hard to just look at the world and understand what's going on. Why is it so difficult? It's because we don't see everything. We often think there's something called bottom up and top down. We think we just experience the world, but the reality is that we have expectations about how the world is going to look like, and often what we see is what we expect rather than what we see. So it's very hard to see the world in a objective way. Just see that I have some clothes here, so let me move it so it'll be a bit nicer here. Okay, more organized. Okay. Question number 2. In which area can behavioral economics find better application? In commercial sphere or in the non-commercial sphere? So, every place where human behavior works, behavioral economics can find things to do. I personally think that the government layer is very important because, at least initially, if you think about how do we get changes, the government does things across lots of people. The government has scale. So doing things with the government has a really easy way to make progress because you can change something small at scale, and that creates lots of benefit. But of course, it will be crazy to think that companies should make any product without understanding human nature. So it's not as if regular companies shouldn't be doing that. I think everybody needs to, but I think the role of small tweaks is probably higher with the government just because they have very, very large scale. Okay. And what would you recommend to us to behave more rational? So, lots of things we could do, but one of the challenges, of course, with behaving rationally is think about the short term versus long term. And when we think about the long term, we often behave more rationally. So the question is, what would get us to behave more in our long-term best interest? And I think one of those things is to think very carefully about habits that we want to create and try to create those habits. So think to yourself about what behaviors you do that are not in your best interest, what behaviors you want to change, and try to create habits around those. Another trick is to give yourself advice. So often when we give advice, oh, by the way, now I see that the light is coming from the side. Maybe not ideal. Okay. Anyway, often when we give advice to people, we give advice in a more objective way. But of course, we don't give ourselves advice. But asking ourselves, what advice would we give ourselves, allow us to kind of step out of our body, out of our immediate situation, and give us advice. And often this advice is more rational. Okay. What are your next plans in the field of behavioral economics? Expect conferences. What's the next goal for society we should aim for? So personally, I try to work on issues that have to do with financial decision making and health. I try to think about where we can help in those areas. How we can get people to spend less, save more, spend better, buy more happiness with less money. How do we get people to exercise, take the medications, eat better? All of those things are, kind of in the toolkit of behavioral economics, and those are the things that I have been working on for the past few years and plan to work more on. And what do I think about HR? Is it rational or irrational, and why? Okay, that's a very big question, so I'm sitting more comfortably. Look, human motivation is incredibly interesting and intricate, and a lot of things about it. Many of them are not rational. From a rational perspective, we work for money, and if they pay us more, we'll work harder. Pay us less, we'll work less hard, and that's it. The reality is that motivation is just fantastic. We're motivated by things like a sense of achievement, competition, helping our fellow men, feeling that we're improving, meaning, feeling of purpose. All of those things motivate us, and from that perspective, motivation is really not rational. But here's the thing. If we have all of those motivations, and many of them are amazing, we need to create a workplace that allow all of them to show up. So imagine two factories. one doesn't treat their employees well, one does treat their employees well. What happens? In one of them, people are unhappy and they don't produce much. In the other one, they're happier and they produce much more. Everybody is better off. Understanding the true trigger points for human motivations benefit everybody. The employees are going to be happier and the people running the company are going to be happier. And I think that this is a place where understanding the irrationality, for example, why we care about meaning and purpose and the sense of achievement and progress and so on, actually benefits everybody. By the way, I recently opened a little investment fund that invests only in companies that treat their employees well. It turns out it's a good strategy. Why? Because companies that treat their employees well do better. It's a system that reciprocates. You treat your employees better, they treat you better, the world gets to be a better place. Okay. The next question, what can we do to improve behavior, extreme activity, racism, populism in society? Very, very tough question. One of the things we know about hate is that one of the only ways to fight it is to know somebody from the other group. You see, usually we have this idea, it's us versus them. They are all the same, whatever the minority or group it is. We are very different, there are nuances and so on. And getting to know an example from that group is one of the only ways that we know to help fight hate. The problem, of course, it's really hard. It's really hard to fight this way extreme Islam, for example, because we're not going to go and have beer with somebody from that group. It's very hard to do it for a group that we're not in peace connection with, because it's very, very tough. So this question about how do we fight those things are some of the toughest in society. There is some light aside from that. There's one approach which I'm really fascinated by. It's called Paradoxical Persuasion. And the idea is that imagine you're on the right, somebody's on the right. And if you give them information from the left, they don't listen. They just block it, right? But what they've tried is to give them information that is more extreme from the right. Like something completely crazy, like let's just kill everybody who is not like us. Or to say, you know what, let's just live in hate because we love living in hate. And let's create the conditions where all of us would fight all the time because we love fighting. And it turns out that when people on the right listen to information from the left, they block it. But when it comes from the extreme right, they say, oh, we're not like that. That's too extreme. And they move more to the center. Now, it doesn't take people from the right and move them to the left, but it does make them more moderate. And I think that recognizing the extremity of our ideas and recognizing that there are nuances and that we don't really adhere to the extremity, and when it threatens our ego, our identity, there's some interesting directions there for improving, reducing extreme behavior. Okay, how is -1 greater than 1? So on my shirt at the conference I had this sign that says -1 greater than 1. Of course it's not true mathematically, but it's an ode to the idea that sometimes less is more. So -1, less, greater than 1, more. Sometimes less is more. It's not always true, of course, that less is more, but it's interesting that we do believe it. Now, it's interesting, right? When you write it in math, it sounds terrible. When you say less is more, we somehow feel it's okay. But anyway, sometimes less is more. Okay, question number 8. Aren't you afraid that somebody may use BE to help people make decisions furthering only the designer's interest? Absolutely. I think that behavioral economics is a tool to get people to act differently. And like all tools, it's at the service of the person who's designing the tool. And if those people are good people trying to promote social good, they'll be able to promote social good. And if they are selfish and they want to do things that are against the total good, they could. So if you say, let's design a new casino, or let's design a new addictive cigarette, or whatever we do, there's certainly the risk of designing things that are not in the best interest of people, in the best interest of the person designing it. And it's something we have to think about, because even though we think of ourselves as good people and so on, as we design systems, we'll have some temptation. We'll have a temptation to design something where people would pay a bit more, be a bit more locked in, and we have to we have to think very carefully about how do we make sure that we're not doing things that are not in the best interest of the people that we're trying to help. Okay, so this is it for me. Thank you again. I had an amazing time. I felt very welcome, and I felt there was enthusiasm around the topic and the conference in general. So thanks for the time, attention, care, and I'm wishing you from Paris all the best. Bye.